Hello, ngHouston. So I'm very excited tonight. We have an awesome show, and we have Stephen Fluin on the show, who is one of my favorite people. Super fun, super fun. And I'm going to introduce my panelists first, real quick. We have Bill Odom from Angular Bootcamp. Bill, you want to say hello?
Hey, everybody. Yeah, Bill Odom from Angular Bootcamp. Also, quite a bit of consulting.
Did we lose Bill?
Did we? I think Bill froze. Sorry, Bill.
Yeah, I can't hear you, Bill.
Uh-oh, did I cut out just as I started my intro?
Yes, you certainly did.
Sorry about that. Bill Odom from Angular Bootcamp. Also do a lot of consulting and independent development work. And the last thing I said was also a big fan of Stephen Fluin.
Yeah, how can anybody not?
I want to make sure I got that most important part there at the end.
You are super fun, Stephen. Okay, and Keith. And I have to say, Keith, I twisted Keith's arm a while back and made him an ngHouston organizer. Even though he tried to resist and said he didn't have time, I told him I really needed his help, and he's been amazing in helping with ngHouston. So I'm really grateful. So thank you, and I'm glad you're here. And hello, you want to say hi?
Yeah. Thanks for the intro, Bonnie. Yeah, I'm Keith Stewart. I'm a co-organizer of ngHouston and a UI architect at CollabNet. So thanks for having me.
I'm glad you're here. And last but not least, Stephen Fluin. I'm so excited that you're here. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us.
Yeah, and thanks so much for having me. So my name is Stephen Fluin. I'm a developer advocate here on the Angular team at Google. So I lead developer relations for us. And so that ends up meaning a whole lot of different things. So I work with a lot of our partners, a lot of our ecosystem. I speak at a lot of conferences. I work with a lot of companies and educators and trainers that are doing things with Angular. I manage our GDE program. So GDEs are our certified experts in Angular, and do whatever I can to make sure that Angular's doing the right things for the community. I often say that my role kind of has two parts. First is to help developers be successful with Angular. And second is to understand what it's like to be an Angular developer so that we can reflect those needs onto the team as we're making sort of product decisions about what should happen when. So I love my role. I'm very lucky.
And I think you're really good at it. I love the fact that you're so approachable and you're just like super chill, and I can walk up to you and ask you questions anytime. And you're so just, friendly and helpful. And I think the whole culture of the Angular team is just so open and welcoming, and you can sit with us. I love it. Love it.
Yeah, no, I think we kind of figured our values. I think it was over a year ago now, where we said that we value apps that users love to use, apps that developers love to build, and a community where everyone feels welcome. And that third part is the thing that I constantly hear, that's why a lot of people love Angular, is because they feel like they're a part of something. And so it's really lucky. I'm really lucky to be here. Well,
we're lucky to have you.
Awesome. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. So we had seen, we were at ngConf and we saw your Angular for Designers talk, and we loved it. And we wanted to see more, and we had some questions and wanted to kind of dive a little bit deeper. So we asked you to come back, and we're very glad you're here.
Awesome. So what I'll do here is I will share my screen. And then as I'll go through a few slides, and as we're going, definitely feel free to interrupt me, because I think the benefit of something like this versus what we did at ngConf is that I can go deeper into details that don't make sense. I don't have to skim and rush through everything. We can maybe have a conversation about a lot of these ideas, because Angular for Designers is such an interesting topic to me in particular. So I will share my screen now.
And I am also going to be watching the YouTube chat. And we have people online who are watching this. So if you guys are watching and you have questions for Stephen, just put it in the chat and we'll try to answer them.
All right, let's see. Did that work? Can you see my screen okay?
It did.
Awesome. So to start, even before I start here, I want to just do a general disclaimer, which is that designer means something completely different to everybody. I bet if you ask everyone on this call, they might give a different definition of designer, right? There's web developers who are designers. There's graphic designers, visual designers, interaction designers. even figuring out what job title to give a designer can often be a huge challenge. And so I'm going to be intentionally non-specific. So when I use the term designer, I'm referring to individuals that focus more on the user interface and user experience, not exclusively, not using any specific tool, just people that focus more on that side of the world. Does that make sense? Anyone want to challenge that definition?
No, we agree.
No, sounds good. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, because we talk all the time to developers that do design, developers that don't do design. There's a whole spectrum of folks out there. So trying to be as inclusive as possible. So the talk that I gave at ngConf, and we'll go a little bit beyond this, but was that really wanted to share that we care about designers and welcoming designers into the ecosystem, going back to kind of the values of the Angular team. Making everyone feel welcome also means making them productive and making them inclusive in a process that we're of building these great experiences for users. And second, I really want to initiate a conversation. And so again, that's why I'm very glad that we get to kind of challenge some of these ideas in real time a little bit more. So if we look a little bit about the background of this, I'll just start kind of there. So, here's a little tidbit that I never actually pointed out in my last talk. All of the images I used here are photographs I've taken of wireframes and experiences I've drawn, because one of the things I did in a past life was I led our UX team. And so our creative director reported up to me. And so a large part of my role was figuring out and designing experiences that combine user needs and business needs. So just a funny little tidbit around all these pictures. We have a really long legacy with designers. So if you look back all the way to AngularJS, there was a long time where AngularJS was being used to create these prototypes. There was this kind of magic where a designer who knew HTML could take some static HTML that they built and drop in and sprinkle in a little bit of AngularJS, and the application would kind of come to life. It would make it feel, it would make it act real. And that was really exciting. And we've lost a little bit of that with going to Angular, because Angular is much kind of more sophisticated. It's much more reliable. It's much more scalable. And so trying to understand what people liked about AngularJS from a designing, from a prototyping standpoint, and bring that into Angular. Second, one of the things that we see is that a lot of designers hand off interactive prototypes. So they'll build something in Sketch or Mockups or Balsamiq or whatever, and then they'll hand that off to a development team, which ends up kind of fundamentally, you end up building at least two versions of the product in a way that you can't iterate or go back and forth. We hear all the time from designers that they kind of get stuck in one system or another, and that's a bit of a challenge. And then lastly, one of the challenges that designers out in the world face is they build these beautiful design systems that are cohesive, that are comprehensive, that manifest the brand to its fullest potential. But then getting developers to actually use these design systems can actually be a really big challenge for them. So I talked about how designers really liked AngularJS, and the thing that really epitomizes this for me is you went to the AngularJS website and you'd start typing, and it would show you the 3 lines of code that you need to write to actually add this rich sort of interactivity. And that was such a magical experience.
That was very nostalgic for me.
What's that?
That was very nostalgic for me.
It is.
I spent a lot of time on that page.
We've actually, as a team, we've spent a bunch of time thinking about this experience and how do we actually make Angular feel like that. And we've got a bunch of ideas, and we think that there's a way to balance the need for build systems and TypeScript and all those things with this idea of being able to get started instantly. And I'll talk a little bit later about that, but things like Stack Blitz, we see as having that, maybe not the exact same, but very similar level of magic. And so some designers know HTML, not all designers know HTML, but if they do, they often want to take what they know and add a little bit of interactivity. And just like I was talking about these challenges that we face, this is harder because if you want to build a scalable, reliable, maintainable application, you need to bring in a bunch of different things, right? You need Node, you need NPM, you need Git, you need TypeScript, you want to write tests. And Angular includes all of these things out of the box because we want developers to be productive as part of large teams. What we ended up seeing was that a lot of developers kind of shot themselves in the foot with AngularJS, where it was possible for them to maybe not follow best practices, not design interactions for scale. And so in Angular, we've kind of solved all of those problems day one so that you're set off on the right path. But all of these things make it a little bit harder to get started. And so this tension is something that we think a lot about. And then I talked about this idea of handing off a spec or a prototype from designer to developer. But these assets are really hard to keep synced. I talked about how oftentimes like you'll start on paper and then you'll go up to wireframing or sketch files or some sort of prototyping tool. And what we've seen is like the natural process would be to go back to the paper or to go back to an earlier step, but that's actually really hard. And so oftentimes designers will end up getting stuck in a later step just because they already have some assets, just because they already have set expectations at a certain level. One of my favorite things that I've ever seen is that every time a designer or a design file is trying to be versioned, you end up adding all these really cryptic systems around it. So you'll see like profile screen 3, and then at some point that will be final, and then so you'll put final in the title, and then you'll add 2, and then really final. And has anyone else seen this?
Yeah, we deal with that all the time in our process. So trying to get a handle on all of that make a huge difference in the experience.
Yeah, because there's fundamentally versioning is designed for code. It's not really designed for designs, right?
Yeah, I felt like you were making fun of me on that really final, because I've literally done that.
Final, super final.
Yeah, for real this time.
I'm sure you could maybe like write a NPM library that detects how many finals there are and then like increments the numbers and then abstracts it into a sequence.
Leave me with my shame.
And then we also see these kind of collisions between designers between designers and developers, where the designer is approaching the problem from the perspective of how should it be, and the developer is approaching it from the perspective of how can it be, or how can I get it done in the timeline and the budget I was given. And then this again creates tension, right? Like either the designer thinks the design is perfect and the developer messed it up, or the developer says, hey, the designer came up with something that was impossible. And there's a very natural tension that our hope is that Angular can kind of be a part of solving by helping to unify these kind of worlds. And so we came up with this idea of Angular for designers. So roughly this is a high-level initiative that encompasses a bunch of different projects where we're trying to draw focus on these problems and these use cases. And then either our team, other teams at Google, other teams out in the wild, kind of by clarifying and crystallizing the problem, we want to find solutions as a community, as kind of a whole broader group. And so like if you think about how do we make Angular useful for designers? So maybe even just restricting that to the designers that know HTML and CSS to start, and then bring some of that magic back in. But also there's things that we can do to those that don't know HTML and don't know JavaScript to create more collaborative teams. So I talked about this idea of what if you didn't have these handoffs? What if you had a single source of truth that then by having that single source of truth, you could bridge the gaps between these kind of disparate roles that sometimes end up being very, very different worlds in some companies. So what if instead of handoffs, there was working together? And then we also, we think a lot about design system authors. One of the insights that we've had in terms of working with lots and lots of companies, lots of developers, is that every company, every organization on the planet has built a design system. Whether or not they know it, whether or not they intentionally did it, they all have one kind of implicitly. And then anytime that they've worked on it for more than a few months, they probably have that manifested as a component library. And so how do you get new developers onboarded with using the component system library? How do you get them onboarded with trying to be consistent with the rest of an application, with the rest of a system? And so this idea of making easily consumable components, we think is a key piece of that, where if you're a design system, if you make it easy and if you design APIs that are intentional about how you pull other people in and how they can get started, this can have a huge impact. My favorite story of this that I would tell all the time is about Clarity at VMware, where VMware had design systems in the past. They created Clarity, the design system, and then because they wanted everyone to use it, they created it as an open source standalone component library available on NPM. And they broadened that even further, where because they wanted partners to use it, they open sourced it so that, like, if you're a VMware partner, you can use the Clarity design system without having to ask permission, without having to go and get special privileges or sign into VPNs. You can just start building, and then VMware and VMware's customers all benefit because they have this really cohesive ecosystem. I think this is a similar idea to what Google's doing with material design, where we want to create a design system that it's kind of a pretty good default out of the box, kind of for no matter what you're doing in a cross-platform way, because ultimately users are going to benefit from that, right? If a user knows how to interact with something because they've got a consistency across design systems, users are going to benefit. We also want to make it easier to build great experiences. So if I'm a developer who maybe spends less time thinking about design, less time thinking about experience, how can we plug them into making better experiences? How can we give them some of the best practices out of the box? This is actually one of the things that we've shipped recently, actually since ngConf, I believe, which is we shipped what we call the starter components for Angular material. And so if you are a developer who wants to build a new experience, you can do, after you ng add at Angular/material, you can ng generate a material side nav, or you can ng generate a dashboard or a list or a table view, excuse me. And so the idea is we want to solve that hard problem of, hey, I'm not a designer, I don't have time, or I don't have the team necessary to focus on these things. What if I can just use some of the better experiences provided by the Angular team out of the box? Has anyone used those starter components on the call here?
Is that schematics?
It's the starter components for Angular material.
I have not yet. I didn't. I think I knew they were out, but I'm just so used to. Well, actually, I was working on something before ngConf and after ngConf, but I'm just so used to doing it that I forgot about that.
So let me connect these two ideas. So we're trying to go kind of both directions. So making Angular better for designers, but also making better design kind of in Angular. And so with the Angular material starter components, you literally ng new a new project, then you ng add at Angular/material, and then you ng generate at Angular/material : material-nav. A bit of a mouthful, but you can check out the blog post about 6.0 for this. And you get this kind of beautifully manifested table view or side nav out of the box. And it's all broken down into the material components that were used to build it. And so you can extend it, you can throw away pieces, you can blow it away if you want. But the idea is we wanted developers to have an option of starting with a beautiful app so that they could kind of start somewhere beautiful and go from there.
I did not catch that blog post. I'm going to have to find that and read it because that sounds good.
that is the 6.0 announcement. We call them starter components.
I have to do that.
Awesome. All right. So now I want to go into the world of initiatives. So I've actually, as a great segue, talked about that last one that I just mentioned, which is the material starter components. But we have a bunch of other things that we're already doing to try and make this better for designers. And so we talked about this idea of making Angular useful for designers, and all of those extra tools that you have to know to get into Angular. But we've actually done a bit of work to make that easier. So if you've never used StackBlitz, definitely check out StackBlitz. Stackblitz.com, you can click on Angular and you can start immediately with a ready-to-go app. I can give a demo if anyone hasn't seen it. But you don't have to learn any command line. You don't have to install anything. You don't have to know NPM. You don't have to know our CLI. Nothing. They've kind of integrated all of these things directly into their experience. And StackBlitz is not the only IDE doing this. For example, if you use WebStorm, they're trying to bake more of the Angular feature set into their experience as well. So on Monday, they actually dropped 2018.2. So the next big version of IntelliJ and WebStorm just dropped. And they've actually embedded a lot of our ng add and our schematics into their experience so that you don't have to go and learn all of the possibilities that you can do as our command line. You can just do those as part of a GUI. And we feel like all of these initiatives are very well aligned to lowering the bar to designers, because we talk to a lot of designers, and a lot of them are very, very capable. They just don't have time to go and learn a new CLI every day, right? Like a lot of them know HTML, they know even a little bit of Angular, but the tooling can get in the way. And so anytime we can remove a barrier there, we're really opening up and broadening the field.
Can you back up a little bit and say, because you just said something that sounded really cool. They added that. They added like the schematics. The StackBlitz guys did.
So I'll just jump over. So StackBlitz. So if you go to StackBlitz, they already have the ngAdd schematics, or ngGenerate, excuse me. So
I love those guys.
Yes,
I didn't know that.
So if you right click here, and they should really make a button for this, but if you right click, you can actually generate all these things, and it does the exact same thing that CLI does because it uses schematics. So
this makes me so happy. I did not know that.
So I just
Eric, Albert, I love you guys. That is so cool. I didn't know.
Yep, and it does all the normal things, like adds it to the app module. And if you look at what WebStorm just did, so we'll actually have a blog post about this very, very soon. They've actually gone past ngGenerate, and they've added integration for ngAdd into their system. So very cool things on the way.
That is so. You just right click. I didn't even know you could right click on that thing. This is fun.
They should have one of these buttons be like, so they've got add file, add folder. It should be like add a magic thing.
I know. This makes me so happy.
Or it should be the default. How about? All right. Sorry. We're getting into Stack.
It's okay. This is fun. I'm so excited.
Every talk anymore ends up being a commercial for StackBlitz.
No, not every talk.
I mean, it's amazing. Those guys are just, and they're so humble. Like, they don't even know how amazing they are.
No, I mean, like, and to me, if you don't have to go learn any of the tooling, that's a magic experience. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, because I think there's other approaches that I would say are convergent with StackBlitz.
Can I tell you something?
Sure.
The first time I ever went to ngConf, the first time I ever paid money for Angular training, I was in a class, and I think it was Pascal, who I love, and they said, is everybody done with npm install? And everybody said yes. And I didn't know npm because I hadn't learned that yet, and I was too embarrassed. I didn't have npm. I didn't know anything about that, and I got an error, and I sat there quietly and was like, okay, I'm an idiot.
Yeah, see,
it was a long time ago, but yeah, it's hard.
Especially people that are new to software engineering, and people that are, we see this a lot with Windows users as well. The command line is a very foreign thing, and if we can skip that command line step, we would actually, like, millions of new developers would be able to use Angular. And
StackBlitz is incredibly fast. I don't know how they made it so fast, but it's very, very fast. And once I believe, because it all runs in the browser on your computer, so you're not relying on Wi-Fi for all the Angular magic to happen. And also, they made it super easy to run a GitHub repo on StackBlitz. Like, you just basically put in.
Open any Angular CLI GitHub repo, and it will automatically import, install, all those sorts of things. It's very cool.
Yeah, we don't want to go off on a tangent, but if you're listening and you haven't done that, go Google it. It's very cool. StackBlitz
Awesome.
Is cool. Yeah.
So I talked about ngAdd generate for material because and I really comment on this from the perspective of not just material and using material design, but we see ngAdd and ngGenerate as a platform. We see schematics as a platform that we want lots of people to contribute to. And so, for example, if you're building a design system, consider creating your own schematics. You can just create them, add them to your package, and then other developers will be able to ngAdd you to their project. And so it kind of goes beyond just the normal npm install all the way to pre-configuring, pre-setting up someone's project in the best way, so they get started on the right foot. So my hope is that any design system out there, I just actually noticed Kendo has ngAdd support, which is really exciting. Native script, I believe they have it as well as soon as our 6.1 release is out, which is very, very soon. So really exciting times right now when it comes to schematics and kind of adoption by the broader community. I also talk about this idea of empowering design system authors from the perspective of tooling, because there's a couple tools out here that I'll talk about. So one is called CompoDoc. So this is a open source project that allows you to put extra metadata. It uses TSDoc under the hood, I think, or JSDoc, or one of those AST parsers and metadata parsers. And it actually looks at all of the components, all the documentation, and you can add extra metadata directly in line with your code, and it generates a whole documentation site about your component library. Has anyone seen CompoDoc before?
Yeah, we've used it on some projects where we've found it quite powerful, but unfortunately quite easy to confuse, which may mean that we need to simplify some of the things that we're doing. But I'm really looking forward to it maturing.
Sure, and like the reason I like to talk about CompoDoc is because it has developers starting to add more metadata to their components. And this metadata is not just for computer consumption, it's for more human consumption. And this really opens up the door to a kind of a cool future where maybe we can do more for humans that are trying to consume our component libraries beyond just documentation demo sites. And one of the arenas that we're working on there is around collaboration. And so I previewed this a little bit at ngConf earlier this year. We actually just did a blog post about designing beyond pictures with this prototyping tool that another team is working on at Google using Angular. So what this prototyping tool allows you to do is over there on the left, you see kind of a hierarchy, you see components. And then in the middle, you see this canvas or artboard where you can actually preview what this will look like. And so the idea here is that we're trying to combine the best of both worlds, where a designer, a PM, anyone that wants to can create their own experiences by dragging and dropping real components. And the kind of magic here is that those real components could come and automatically be imported from a component library. And so we did this blog post, but I do want to take actually one small step further and do a very, very brief demo here. So keep in mind, this is not fully public yet. Like, nobody else can access this. Nobody else can use this. This is just a really early demo of some of the things that might be possible in the future. But we do have a team that's working hard on this. So I strongly believe that this will become a reality. And so I'm excited to kind of share just a very brief preview of this. So this tool is not...
anyone else seeing Steven's display going cattywampus?
Yeah, it's all pixelated.
Your display is going crazy.
Huh.
Maybe you should stop sharing and then share again.
Sure. So you can see me?
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, that's better.
And now, can you see my screen?
Oh, it's fixed.
All right. So
That's
as I
awesome.
said, this is the prototyping tool.
Okay, hold on. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Is this software that we need to download?
So all of those things are TBD.
Okay.
I mean, right now this is web-based. So I just pointed my browser at this URL.
Well, we had somebody in the YouTube chat that was asking if are we going to have resources for not only Mac people, because I think Sketch was one that was mentioned early on that is specifically for Mac. But this, when it is released, is it released? No, it's not released yet.
No, definitely.
But it will be for both platforms, Mac and Windows, right? I assume.
And Chrome OS and Linux. I mean, it's browser based, so it's an Angular app. Of course, it's going to work everywhere. So what we have here is this is a prototyping tool that uses real Angular components. And so what I mean by that is this is like an MD card. You can see MD buttons here. And if you wanted to, you don't have to. You can actually look under the hood and you can see some of the code here. So I can actually format this. So the idea is that a designer or a prototyper or a PM or whomever could actually create one of these just by dragging and dropping. So if I, for example, wanted to put a slider on here, I could just drag and drop the slider. And now this is when if I'm doing UX research, if I'm showing this off to someone, this actually is a real kind of Angular app that you can be absolutely sure there's not this uncanny valley between the prototype and the reality. So very quickly, the idea here is that you can pull in components and do designs and all those amazing things. And there's a couple cool features that we're playing with it that we're excited that we hope we'll be able to bring to the world. So one of these is the ability to extract. So I just created this MD card. It's got a title. It's got all these things. You could actually extract some of those things as a new component. So now I've created a My Card component. If we look over here, what I should see is now this component has been abstracted. So if I reorder this, change it, if I had multiple pages here that were using that same component, they're all going to update automatically.
Oh,
so we
really cool.
Again feel like this is going to be really magical in terms of its ability to bridge the gap between design systems, developers, designers, PMs, all these people.
I love this so much.
Yes, and then so for example, if I change the title here from Shiba Inu to something else, let's just, oops. We can see it changes everywhere. But one of the cool things is that all of the components, we actually expose their inputs directly as options over here. So we actually have a data model. And so, for example, you can bind to the data model. Let's see if I can do this here. So input. So if I drag a mat input onto here, it's not going to render because it's the wrong thing. But the idea is I could drag this title into the placeholder, and then it's going to automatically render from my data model. So all these things make prototyping easier. And so we're very excited about that. Whoa.
I am very excited about that.
I saw that it was generating your HTML for you. I didn't see any place in there for actually doing like the styles as well. I'm assuming that would be part of it as well.
So it depends what you mean by styles. So oftentimes, I think, so again, this is all early. We have to figure out kind of what all this means. But in general, when you're given a design system, when you're given a set of components from your company,
Sure.
They don't actually want you restyling everything.
Gotcha.
And so that gets at some of the natural tension between designers, design systems, business units, and central IT, things like that. So if you know how those things work, you could actually go modify the HTML. I mean, all of that would just work just fine. But ideally, you're collaborating with the design system team so that if they want it to be themable, then those themes end up as an input somewhere on one of the components, and then you could kind of change that.
I got you. So the workflow for that then would be you develop the initial components elsewhere, import those in, and then you're arranging them and
or you just use a component library that exists already, like Material or ng Bootstrap or Clarity or whatever.
Nice.
We have questions in the chat. Sorry, go ahead.
It's really cool to see things like this start happening. One of the conversations that we had with Brad at ngConf was around, as Angular has matured, but has also proven that it's not going to just slip out from under people. There's not going to be this giant set of changes that's caused people to have to like go back and completely re-architect and rethink their entire applications. It's been much more realistic to use it as a platform, and the ecosystem is beginning to mature on top of it. And
it's exploding. I love it.
Yeah, that's probably the thing we're most excited about. As much as we love Angular, the framework, Angular, the platform, is proving to be, even more exciting. When I see tools like this, though, one of the things I worry about, I'm old enough to remember Visual Basic, like early Visual Basic. And it was possible to do things very much like what you just demonstrated, and it was extremely powerful. And it was also possible to create an absolutely glorious mess. I made a huge amount of money cleaning up those glorious messes, so go for it.
So maybe what I'll clarify is this is not intended to build real apps. This is intended to build prototypes.
Okay, all right.
So by restricting our focus, then when you drag and drop and the HTML is not clean, it's not the biggest problem.
Gotcha.
I love it. I love it because I think it's making it so visual makes it so accessible for so many people. And I think that old page that you showed us from the original AngularJS, where you can actually put it in there and see it right there, like this is what it's going to look like right in front of your eyes. I love it so much. It makes me happy. So can we do a couple of quick questions from the chat?
Sure.
And okay, so Elliot, I think you said this, but I want you to say it again because now that we've seen it and we're all excited about it, what is the name of this future magical tool?
Let's say it doesn't have a name yet. Name TBD.
It's gonna have to have an exciting and magical name. I think it needs to. It can't just have like a, technical. It needs to have like a superhero.
If you got the perfect name, you let me know.
Okay, we're gonna tweet it. You guys have to help us come up with a magical name for this thing. Okay, and Andrew took my question because this is actually what I was gonna ask too. Is it gonna work with Angular Flex Layout? Because I kind of love Flex Layout, but Flex Layout and material design. I mean, there's a lot of complicated stuff going on with the Shadow DOM, and so it's not always necessarily that. I mean, it seems like in theory it would be easy when you're doing mockups to put these two things right next to each other and have the little. But it's not necessarily always easy because sometimes they kind of.
Sure. What I would say is, I could totally be wrong with this, so feel free to correct me. I don't think a lot of designers know about Flex Layout or think in that way. And so first of all, I don't think it would be interesting, but in general, Flex Layout takes a lot of its configuration as inputs. And so from that perspective, it would work just fine, right? You would import the Flex Layout. You would drag and drop a Flex Layout component into your template, and then you'd be able to modify the inputs and configure it. But I don't think that's the problem we're trying to solve necessarily. But I do get that. I mean, I think at the end of the day, what you want is to be able to make it look like how you're picturing it in your head. And so it's on us to make that easy.
It doesn't necessarily have to be Flex Layout specifically, but I think for me, like visually, when I see that, kind of easy prototype thing, what I want is, what if I want two input boxes next to each other with a space in between? Like, how easy is it going to be for me to like maybe float something next to something else? Because sometimes that gets tricky, and sometimes that's tricky when it really doesn't seem like it should be tricky.
Probably not as easy as we'd want it to be.
yeah, because it's tricky. Yeah. It's a common thing I think a lot of people struggle with.
Well, as powerful as a lot of these tools were, back in the day, one of the things that they didn't have to contend with was, oh, this is going to have to make sense on a 60-inch television and a 5-inch phone, and it's got to be the same app, and you got to be able to handle all the scenarios that you might throw at it. So I don't envy anyone trying to build some sort of flexible layout system that you can throw at any problem like that. So I wish these folks well, and I can't wait to see what they come up with.
I kind of compare it to, we have this amazing thing and we can build all these wonderful tools, and I mean, I love Angular Material has a special place in my heart, right? So I kind of compare it to like when you're on a plane and you're mad because your Wi-Fi is not fast enough. And it's like, here I am, going through the air a mile up, and I'm like mad because my Wi-Fi is like slow, right? That's kind of how I
Wi-Fi, right? Like,
yeah, like look at the technology that made this possible. Look how far we've come in the last 5 years, and then I get frustrated because I can't figure out how to float something. It's all, sorry.
My phrase is that this is going to let me complain at a whole new level.
I know. Yeah, it's because we're spoiled rotten. That's why.
Yeah, we live in an age of miracles. I don't know what we're whining about.
Yeah.
Awesome. Was there more questions from the chat?
No, I think you should. Leaf was giving Bill a hard time for going all the way back to Visual Basic. But no, I think you have more to show us, right?
I almost went back to DBase 3.
Oh, no. See, you're not Dreamweaver? Dreamweaver is the place my brain always goes.
I started with Dreamweaver. I love Dreamweaver.
Oh yeah, like the way that Dreamweaver made a templating, like DWT files, and it would re-render out every index or every HTML file based on whatever you made.
Right, exactly.
And then,
okay, so sorry, we just got another question. Elliot wants to know, he said they use Sketch and InVision. Will this replace that?
So I don't think we're trying to replace any tool. It depends on what you use them for. I mean, Sketch is really good at all of the things Sketch is good at, right? Like, so there's typically a sequence of building out experiences, right? So everything from sketching on pieces of paper to drawing on whiteboards, like there's a whole spectrum, and we're not trying to replace any tools. We just want to make it really easy to build real prototypes that actually have no uncanny valley, that are using real components, and also encouraging and allowing this kind of full loop of if for example, a designer needs something changed in the design system, they can ask for that changed. They can build 100 pages of prototypes and then say, hey, design system, can you tweak that button so that it has an extra mode? And then all 100 prototypes are up to date automatically. Kind of that's the magic here.
That's beautiful. And this is what I love about the Angular team, because like if somebody says, you know, well, this can, like, you guys are never going to say this is better than your thing. Like, you guys are just such nice people that you just say that we built this, you can use it if you want. Let us know what you think.
Yeah, the idea behind like a platform in general is there's way more smart people outside of your company, outside of your team than inside. So how do you empower those people instead of trying to do it all yourself? So I'll jump back to my slides here because I had a couple more things to say, and then we can jump back to free-form conversation. All right, so we gave that a try. It seemed to work a little bit, which is good. So now I want to turn a little bit into some new initiatives that I'm not committing to a timeline, but I'm committing that I'm going to do whatever it takes to make some of these happen. So one thing that we've done a bunch of research on and try to do research is this idea of what if I could give you a binary that replaced npm node and our CLI. So that I used to call this project ng.exe, but you can think of it as like a console that would help you create new projects, serve them, those sorts of things, and take that out of the command line world and put that in the web world. So we're researching right now. We're thinking what's the best approach for solving this problem. And the community is having a lot of really good ideas and a lot of really cool things that they've got coming down the pipeline, I think, for this idea.
Can you tell us how this one fits in with Rob's Angular Elements? Is it related at all?
No. So how you use Angular Elements with our CLI that we have today, and how you would use that with this theoretical GUI console would be the exact same. The console would just really replace you having to go and install node npm the Angular CLI and then running ng new to get started. It would just say, hey, run this binary, and then a beautiful experience would walk you through it.
So it's a little bit like the MAMP utility, MAMP, for, you know, I've used it on Windows and other machines, but you know, one of the reasons that PHP was such a success was it was ridiculously easy to get a PHP plus MySQL plus Apache environment all running via a single exe. Is it kind of like that?
Yeah, you can think of it like that. So obviously nothing's been shipped, nothing's been finalized, but yeah, I think it would serve a very similar purpose of, I mean, you could have gone and installed Apache, you could have set up MySQL, you could have set up PHP on your machine, but what if you didn't have to? What if you could focus on the app you're building first?
Right.
This is the hard part of coming on ngHouston, because everything you say, we're going to go, Steven, this is cool. When can we have it? You're like, back off, you guys.
So and this one and the next one actually tie in together. So I want to have an ng add Angular/prototype. So if you do want to have a local version, you're not using a prototyping tool, there's a bunch of different settings that we've heard from designers that would make more sense to them. So things like inline templates, inline styles that seem to make more sense, and then turning off all the spec files, turning off all the tests. If you're exclusively building a prototype, we could pre-configure the application for you with those defaults, and trying to bake in what do designers actually want to start with and going from there. So this is one way that we're going to try and use ng-add to make that manifest. The next one still doesn't exist, Bonnie. You can keep refreshing.
I was so excited. Page not found.
But I do want, it's my personal mission now to make sure that we launch a landing page for designers that just correlates concepts they know to Angular and matches and kind of shows some of the best tooling that is out there and how teams can collaborate and all the organizational side of things in addition to the technical side of things. So I'm definitely going to work hard to make sure that this ends up happening in the next few months.
Well, I would love to help with that. If you need help, let me know. All
right. So those are the things that are kind of in flight, talking about, working on. The rest of this is all just me making stuff up. So what if we had simpler components? So we've actually gotten this request a bunch of times. So what if you could have a single file component where you put the TypeScript, you put the CSS all in a single HTML file? This it makes sense to some people. It seems to cause challenges to other developers. But in general, the overall desire for simpler components, I think, could add a lot of value to a lot of people. If within Ivy, within the new rendering pipeline, manipulations like this will be easier because it'll be easier to kind of pre-process some of the things that are coming through. But even if you think about this today, and this is kind of where I want to engage the community and make this more of an open conversation, you could build a rendering pipeline today, like a Webpack loader or a pre-compilation, pre-serve step that turns a single file component into a component.ts and a component.css. This wouldn't actually be that complex for someone to do, at least in a naive way. So I'll kind of put it out a little bit to the community that if this is something you care about, let's talk about collaborating and building the sorts of tools that you're looking for.
So Stephen, what's the motivation or what is it that people are asking for when they're saying, oh, life would be better if this were a single file? With the kind of tools that you've shown and the workflows that we're imagining, what does it matter if it's a single file or a directory that contains a bunch of files, or if it's all in a database somewhere?
Sure. So Angular projects, as I've said, they scale very well. They're very maintainable. Like they have a structure for collaboration. They do all these things well. But if you are a single person working on a single project that you want to throw away in 2 days, a lot of the things there, we just tell you to ignore them. And ignoring things can be hard, right? It's distracting you. You end up in the wrong file and you don't know what you're doing there. If we could have a simpler file system where maybe modules are optional, maybe all your components are just single files, that would make things much easier for easy use cases. And the challenge there for us is that we don't want to do that in a way that makes it harder to scale later. So that's kind of the fundamental tension.
Right.
And I think the learning curve is steep because Angular is very powerful, but something like this is going to be so much easier for people who are just learning, to just have it simple and only what we need, and we don't have to add all the pieces if we're just kind of trying to do something. Because if you spin up a brand new CLI project right now, it could be a lot. There's a lot of files there. Hey, Stephen, your screen went garbled again. Can you turn off your screen share and turn it back on just real quick?
Sure.
Because I think that worked very well last time.
Sure.
You know, I think, the challenge you're talking about, Bonnie, is definitely something that we see a lot with, you know, at this point, I've probably seen about 3,000 new people to Angular. And I know other instructors at Angular Bootcamp are about the same place. And that is definitely one of the challenges. So now that I understand the kind of audience that we're talking about, it makes a lot more sense. We have actually come up with much more simplified ways of starting projects, telling people all along that, hey, this can get and probably will get quite a bit more complicated, but we just want to illustrate the concepts right now. I mean, Stephen, you've sat in on some of our classes and have pulled me aside later and gone, I know you're having to do all this, but man, I hate that you're having to do all this to get things moving. I know you just want to teach people Angular, but most of what you're doing on that first morning is infrastructure. And yeah, we've tried as much as we can to simplify it. And I should give an absolute shout out to the folks who have done such amazing work to make that simpler and to make it possible for us to say things like, hey, don't create spec files. Don't create separate template files. Let's just keep everything in one place. But it is a challenge. It's something we have to address because it can be overwhelming for people right out of the gate.
Sure.
Yeah.
So instead of switching back to slides, I'll just talk through the last couple of points, and then we can dive into a much better conversation. So
yeah, but don't forget about the Mary Poppins thing, because I don't want you to forget that. I really want to hear about that.
So one of the things that we have as part of the Angular repo is anytime a team member makes a commit to the Angular repository, whether it's a PR, whether it's a commit, we always spin up a preview site, a preview version of that build. And it's via a bot called Mary Poppins. And so we're looking, and again, this is not a commitment, we're looking at what if we could make that reusable by other teams, so that you could just plug this into your CI, and then it automatically builds and hosts previews of your site. So if you look in the Angular repository on any of the PRs, you'll often see Mary Poppins pop in and say, hey, here's a preview of this.
I like it. Who came up with that name?
I have no idea.
I don't know why. Somehow I think that you just know everything there is to know about the Angular team.
I wish I did. Maybe in another. I've only been on the team like 2 years, 3 months, so maybe in
Really?
another 3 years.
I feel like I've always known you. You've just always been there.
Well, Angular really got started with me, right? So
Yeah, for sure.
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, the magicians are the other members of the team. I just talk about stuff.
They're pretty amazing.
And then the last thing that is kind of really on us, the onus is on us, is we want designers to really benefit from the advancements we make in Angular. So, for example, when we make, when Ivy lands at some point in the future in a future release, everyone will benefit from that, right? Not just developers, but designers. They'll get faster experiences. It'll be easier to prototype, more conceptually simple. Like all these things that we're going to make better for developers, tooling, stack blitz, all these things. It's going to make everything better for designers. So we're really excited about kind of the cross hibernation there, or cross pollination. I don't know what cross hibernation is. And then lastly, the thing I'll end with is we really do want this to be an initiative shared with the community. We heard a ton of really good responses and got a lot of feedback after my presentation at ngConf this year. And so if this is something you're interested in, definitely do get involved, get in touch. You can message me on Twitter. You can send me smoke signals, whatever works best for you, because we feel like this is not something we can do alone. And so if we can empower the community to make great things, this is amazing. I'll do a quick shout out as a great recent top of mind example. We actually just did a blog post. I'll give 2 examples. We just did a blog post on a research center in, I think it was Switzerland, that they added multiple calendaring support to the material date picker because they needed it for making history more accessible, because they had these letters and where like one person was writing in one calendar, the other person was writing in another calendar. And so you needed to be able to pick a date in either calendar. And they had this need. And so they just contributed back to the open source project, solved it for everybody. And then the other example would be Manfred Steyer with NGX Build Plus, where he's solving problems for developers in the community in a way that we love. And just like his way of building custom elements or Angular elements for redistribution is the way you should do that today.
I love that guy. We need to have him on the show. I just made a note, and now it's your fault. We're going to go and find him and be like, hey, come on, ngHouston. Come on. That's awesome. So cool. So Andrew said we have a Slack channel. So your DMs are open on Twitter, right? So even if you're not following them, they can send you a message. And Andrew just asked about our Slack channel. So Andrew, send me your email and I'll add you to our Slack channel. If anybody else wants to be on the ngHouston Slack channel, send me your email address. Just DM me on Twitter. And so people can DM you on Twitter if they have questions or if they have comments or anything
Stephen
like that.
Fluin, STEPHEN FLUIN.
Yes. Okay, and then Leaf had another really good question. How much has the team been able to get buy-in for these design ideas from your internal clients?
Extensively. So that prototyping tool is actually being built by some members of the design team for Google Cloud Platform. So like the Angular team, like we have a lot of projects using Angular at Google, and so a lot of them are starting to contribute back things they've figured out and things they've discovered and tools that they want to share. So I think we're very excited.
I think anyone who is anywhere near the front end of their app would be way crazy excited about everything that you showed us, because this is super cool.
Absolutely.
All right, panelists, do you have any other questions?
Oh, so many.
So many. I know we don't ever want you to leave. We'll just keep you here all night if we could, because you're super cool.
Keith, I'm going to let you talk because I've like filled up an iPad with like things to ask about. So.
Nice. Can't wait to hear those. Stephen, I'm curious about what some of the feedback is that you've gotten from the community coming out of the talk at ngConf. What aspects of this are folks most excited about?
I will say about 4/5 of the feedback was, oh my God, yes, please. Can I have it now?
When? Give it to me now.
No, I think we have had a ton of really good conversations about different folks that come from different contexts, right? Where one was a development team that was trying to get their designers to be to think the way that they think and to take into mind their constraints. We've heard from designers who say, hey, I don't like doing HTML, I don't like doing JavaScript, but I know how to do it. Make me more productive. And then we've heard from people all the way on the other end of the spectrum where I don't know how to code at all. I don't know how software is built. And the idea of a drag and drop interface builder that might actually be useful for someone for doing UX research, that's super powerful.
Awesome.
This is like when I first started, when I was younger, I ran into a lot of people that just, I don't know, sometimes you find people that just don't really want to share, and they kind of act like, hey, I'm smarter than you and I can do this. And from the very beginning, well, not from the beginning when I was first learning AngularJS, I was learning it all by myself, all alone from the docs. But when I started really interacting with the Angular community and the Angular team, it's like, you guys take this really amazing, complicated stuff and really actually try to make it super easy so anybody can do this. And it's just, it warms my heart. It really does.
Yeah, that's why I really love live demos. So in probably half my talks now, at least, I do live coding demos just to show you like the parts that you actually have to understand at any one moment are very simple. They're very straightforward. I mean, obviously the whole is much more complex than the sum of its parts, but I mean, each problem that you encounter, you can do it. You can take it on, you can solve it and learn it.
That reminds me, a little quick plug. I just found you have been like quietly putting these little YouTube videos up of just like really cool little snippets of, hey, let me teach you something neat. And so what is it called? What's your channel called?
Demos with Angular.
Demos with Angular. I love that. It's just like, you guys, if you haven't checked it out, he's just like, he's just like, I didn't even know it was there, and I found it and I was like, this is so cool, because it's just like little snippets of Steven teaching us cool stuff. So if you haven't found that,
it's kind of funny. Like at Google, we have really awesome like studios. We have really awesome teams that can help with this. Like if you ever watch Firecast or Polycast, like we have some amazing people that make amazing videos, way better than anything I can do. But for me, I keep so busy with the community and with the team that I've never prioritized trying to take advantage of those studio things. So what I do is I go home at night once a week, and I just film a little bit of video in my office, just super low rent, just build something, show the concept, and be done.
These are bespoke artisanal videos that you're working on, Steven. That's the way you need to package that.
Maybe.
I do have one complaint, though. You have an awesome blog, but it has one fatal flaw. There's no RSS feed. I know that sounds like a voice from the distant past, but man, I'd love to be able to add that to my RSS reader.
I could do that. I already have a sitemap, so.
There you go. Okay, anybody else have any more questions?
Yeah, obviously this is a bigger problem than just Angular. Like you were talking about at the beginning, the classic case of someone building or a designer building a design, and then it's been iterated multiple times, and the sort of thing that developers know how to solve with source control. And I've been one of those folks that's described the wonders of source control to a designer, and they're like, yeah, I need that in my life. That sounds fantastic. How do I get that? And then I try to walk them through using the tool, and they're like, yeah, never mind. I was wrong about wanting that in my life. There's a lot of process. There's a lot of workflow. There's all this collaboration stuff that we were talking about earlier. And it's an extraordinarily hard problem to solve. I would be amazed if the Angular team can solve that problem, but I don't think it's just an Angular problem.
So here's one perspective on solving that.
What did you say?
So here's one perspective on solving that, which is about having a single source of truth. So if you think about Google Docs, in general, you don't need a ability to fork or branch a Google Doc, because everyone edits the same document. They all, like, the source of truth is universal, and you can all look at the same thing. And I think that same magic could come from a prototyping tool, where if designers don't go into a vacuum and build something and then come back and then get people's reaction, and when at the same time they go in 3 different directions, if we can just have one source of truth that we iterate on, and you can have multiple roles iterating on it together, I think you get closer to, I mean, you still want a revision history, but it can be linear. It doesn't need to be branched.
How do you reconcile that? I mean, this sounds fantastic, don't get me wrong, but how do you reconcile that with what you were saying earlier about this is just a prototyping tool? This is just an approach for building, a prototype. The real thing comes later. Well, it sounds like that turns into the real thing, and we're really building the real thing. I want it to be the real thing, but I'm not sure what that looks like in practice. I'm
not sure either.
Bill's got some hard-hitting questions tonight. This is the ngHouston hot seat.
I am so happy with what I'm seeing. This is me going, yeah, that sounds great, and I also want more.
Yeah, help us solve it.
I love it. All right, Stephen, I really hope that you will come back and visit us again soon and often. And if you pass Kara in the halls, tell her to come and visit us too, because we love Kara and we're pretty excited. Is she working on Ivy?
Yeah.
We've never had Kara on the show, and if we get Kara on the show, we're going to be very excited.
Yeah, so. Kara just did, I don't know if you guys saw Google I/O, but she's got a very highly rated, highly viewed demo of some of the work that she's been doing on Ivy from Google I/O this year. So definitely check that video out if you haven't seen it.
I'm going to watch it. I'm a huge fan.
No one lab codes like Kara.
I know, she's amazing. I aspire to be more like Kara.
So hard.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you to the people participating in the chat, and thank you to the panelists, and especially thank you very much, Stephen Fluin, and we hope to have you back soon and often.
Oh, and I guess I'll make one final announcement before we go here. 6-1's out. Hooray!
Hooray!
You heard it here first, you guys.
You did it, Bonnie.
I know, right? That's awesome. Thank you so much, and we'll see y'all next week.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.